There you go. Okay, yesterday we learned that Vayikra El Moshe, that God called to Moses. This is the beginning of this week's Torah portion. And it doesn't say that God called, it just says that he called to Moshe. It doesn't say his name, God's name. So one of the questions is, why doesn't it say God's name? Why? Then the Rebbe brings from different midrashim to explain the interesting fact that this, if you look in the Torah scroll, you'll see that this letter Aleph, Vayikra, is a small Aleph. It's a little Aleph. It's written smaller than the other letters. So he asks why. So we have two questions already. Why is it that God's name is not mentioned? It just says Vayikra El Moshe, that he called to Moses, and it, of course, is referring to God. Why is it that this Aleph is small? Also, it says in another place that when God called to Moses, it wasn't like Abraham. With Abraham, an angel would call to Abraham, and then God would speak. But with Moses, it was God personally would call Moses, and then God would speak. And so what's this idea of God calling, and why did God have to call at all? Why did he have to call to Moses to speak to him? What did he have to call to him? What's this idea of calling to Moses? Okay, so we learned yesterday what exactly was happening when God called to Moses, when he spoke to Moses, when he revealed himself to Moses, when he revealed himself to Abraham, when he revealed himself to us in the Holy Temple, when he revealed himself to us at Mount Sinai. What does it mean God is revealing himself? When God reveals himself, then what does everybody see? What does everybody see when God reveals himself? So the answer is that it's totally incomprehensible what we see. But let's just take an example. If a person could see life, could see life. What is life? Have you ever seen life? Everyone's alive. There's all these birds and cats and dogs and trees, plants and bugs and the subatomic particles and things like that. And they're all alive. They're all moving around. They're all alive. According to Judaism, even the planets are alive. And there's all what's happening, whatever. Then there's all these angels and things like that. Okay, maybe we don't see the angels, but we certainly see people alive. Do we ever see life? What is life itself? Just pure life. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's no such thing. You can see living things, but you can't see what is life itself. Well, God is like the source of life. And it says that the life force of the angels is infinitely more than our life. It says that if a person would see an angel, he would die. Angels are so alive and so real that a person can't take it. Here in this world, a person just wins the lottery, $30 million something, he goes crazy. And that's just that's like a little nothing, just a little more life. So what exactly is it? What is it that Moses saw? So Moses saw the source of life. And really it's not the source, the life itself is incomprehensible. The source of life is how much more so incomprehensible. What about the source of that source? In other words, the higher you go in the spiritual worlds, the higher you get close to the source, the more real and intense things become. So we have no idea what's going on, what that means. But if you want to get to the source of the source of the source of all sources, right? You can say, well, that's God. Well, the fact is that's not God. That's only just an aspect of God. The essence of God really is in the Torah. And this is totally incomprehensible. I mean, it's above the angels, above the levels, the spirits, this. Okay, that's what that's what we're learning now, the Torah, right? So Here's Vayikra. What God is calling to Moses, and he's giving him ideas of Torah. He's giving commandments of the Torah. So it said that there, and what was in the Holy Temple, what was in the essence of the Holy Temple, was the tablets, the Torah, that was in the Holy of Holies. So that's much, much higher than the source of all life, than life, than the source of the source, than all these things. As long as you can call them a source, it means somehow or other, in some incomprehensible way, it's limited. And it's, like I say, we can't understand what, somebody dies, they go to the next world, everybody's berserk, they're going out of their mind. Where's grandpa? He's left us. He didn't live, he just went up to another world. Where the world? Who sees the worlds? Nobody sees. So it says that's just the worlds. The Creator himself is much higher than that. And the aspect of the Torah is the reason for the creation. That's even higher. So this level of concealment, that's called that God makes darkness his hiding place. Yoshet Choshech Sitro. God makes darkness into his dwelling place, his hiding place. In other words, it's so incredibly real that it's totally, totally beyond being incomprehensible to us. And that's what's called this darkness. That was the cloud. That was the cloud that covered over the tent of meeting, and Moses couldn't go in. So he says, one second, there was a cloud that covered in Mount Sinai, and he did go in. So it says there were two different clouds. That's what it says in the Zohar. Okay. Chapter, paragraph 2. Hine. Look, and therefore, Neramar, it says, Vayikra Moshe. That's why it says that God called to Moses. Pirish, what does it mean? Kriyazu, what does it mean that God called to Moses? I know, Ha'arav, Hashpa, Moshe. This was a giving over of power to Moshe, Kadei, in order, by means of this, Yochel Lalot, he would be able, Lavo, to come, Lalot, to elevate, and to come into this higher level of godliness, which was the tent of meeting. That's the tabernacle. Because the Holy Temple, that was the place where this essence revelation of God was. And it was too intense for Moshe. Moshe couldn't go there. Too intense. So God called him. And this calling doesn't mean just like you call somebody up on the phone. Calling means also a giving of power. Giving of power, giving of, in a certain way, that's also now, a little baby he hears his mother calling him. Oh, his mother is calling to him. That gives him an inspiration, a power to come closer to his mother, right? A child falls down and his mother says to him, Shlomo, don't be, he hears his mother's voice. Oh, that gives him power. So this is not just calling. When God called to Moses, it wasn't just that he was calling up, oh, your turn, sir, you can come in. We see another examples of calling. For instance, it says, and we see this every day, that the angels call one to the other. We say this in our prayers every day, right before Shema. It says the angels call one to the other. What do they say when they call to the other? Omer, they say, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy. Targum Yonatan, if you look at the Aramaic translation from Yonatan ben Uziel, Targum Yonatan, not Yonatan ben Uziel. Targum Yonatan, as it says, Makablin, there's Targum Unclus, and there's Targum Yonatan. Makablin, Dain min Dain, that they receive one from the other. Excuse me, just give me one. Okay, good. It says in Targum Yonatan, right? Targum Yonatan, it's attributed to Yonatan ben Uziel. The Targum Yonatan, some of this Yerushalmi. Let me just turn this off here. Oh, okay. So what does it say? It says that Umakablim den min den. when it says that they call one to the other, the Targum Yonatan is, excuse me, umakablim din, that they receive one from the other. Bromim Kaddish. Shetargum, that's the idea of kriya. They call, not just they're calling, but they're receiving. The angels, they receive one from the other. Each one gives to the other one. That's what it means that they call one to the other. So he said, and he's right. It can't be that the angels are calling to one the other. Hello, Raphael. Hello, right? The angels are calling Michael, Gabriel. If so, it doesn't make any sense. Why does Michael have to call Gabriel in a time when he's saying Kaddish and Gabriel is calling to Michael? They're all saying holy, holy. What are they doing? They're interrupting one the other and they're saying holy. Right? One calls to the other. Each angel says 3 times holy. Where do they get the power to say each time holy, holy, holy? Each one receives from the other. This is how they receive. They receive one from the other, the angels. So this is the one, Vayikra, this Vayikra here that we're talking about, means that Moses received something. Vayikra el Moshe, that Moshe, God was giving Moshe something. Not that just he was calling him. He was giving him something. What was he giving? It says, Shemamshichim said that they are giving one to the other, and each one receives from the other. He says, Ella, Inyan is because the Kriya Zu, Inyan Kabbalah, it's receiving. Each angel receives from the other one. Also Moses over here, he's receiving something from God. Hainu. Sha'al Yadei Zed, that by means of this, that the angels receive one from the other, the Korah Zel Zeh, Yochal Lomar, each angel can say 3 times Kodesh. What does it mean that angels are saying holy, holy, holy? What does it mean God is holy? Why does the angels saying it? What's this mean? This whole idea that the angels say holy, Zehu Hakalot Nefesh Shelo. This is the longing, the expiration. How do you want to say that the soul goes out? The Orein Sof Baruch Hu. Shehu Kenyan Yetzias Bashir. They go out with a song, holy. Right? I mean, it's a terrible example, but I remember it used to be in the crowd would go crazy, like for a rock and roll singer. They would scream out his name. Oh, right. They would scream this name. Oh, they would go berserk just to be in the same room as this rock and roll singer. He was right. They would yell and they would scream. This is a very common thing also now. In other words, they see somebody that's so real. He draws, a million people come to see his concert. Everybody's just yelling out his name. Oh, this is such an amazing human being. I never thought the human being could be like this. They're all screaming out his name. Well, the same thing is with the angels. The angels, they just want to be closer to Hashem. The Havdil, just to bring an example. They're all screaming out, holy, God is holy. He's so real. He's so intense. That's what it means that the angels go out with their singing. That's what Isaiah saw, these visions in Ezekiel of these angels screaming out to God. Mechoel, for instance, there's one angel, one camp of angels called Mechoel. Hakalat Nefesh Shelo, his expiration, his going wild, crazy for God is with love. Gabriel is with fear. How awesome God is. If so, the angel Mechoel, that his thing is just one way. I mean, the angels are called animals. They only have one way. Each one has its own nature. The nature of Mechoel is to have love. If so, he could just say that God, he can only appreciate how much God is good. Therefore, we could only say God is holy one time. This would be loving God. That's the angel Michael. Similarly, Gabriel, he would only be able to say one time, holy, because all he can appreciate is how awesome God is. He has fear. He doesn't appreciate how good God is. In order that each one of these angels would be able to say 3 times holy, it means that they have to give one to the other. That the angel Michael gives over an appreciation of how good God is to the angel Gabriel. And Gabriel, he gives over an appreciation of how awesome God is. He gives that to Michael. This is what's called a harmony of an inclusion of one to the other. So that all three would be able to have all three aspects of the angels would be able to have all 3 aspects of God: love and fear and balance, beauty. Here he doesn't talk about the third aspect. In general, these are 3 ways of serving God: Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Michael and Gabriel and Raphael. Michael is love, Gabriel is fear, Raphael is like beauty, balance, mercy. Sometimes it's called mercy. By means of this, that these angels have the ability to give over one to the other their appreciation of God. That each one can say 3 times Kaddish. See, we can skip this, I think. Let's see, where does this go up to? Says by means of this also they're elevated more, like when explained in another place. This is the same. Let's see, where does it go up to? Vayikra Elokim. Oh, and similarly, Parish Vayikra. It's the same thing over here. What we said, Vayikra Moshe, that God called to Moshe. Doesn't say who, but we know that it's God. We'll see why it doesn't say who. Moshe. So it is also when God called to Moshe. It means that God was pulling down. He was giving down to Moshe this inspiration, this awareness, this higher level of himself, of godliness. This is the little aleph in Vayikra. This is the little aleph. Now, if we remember that the Torah is the wisdom and the will and the essence of God, so what's being spoken about here, on one hand, is the most simple of simple. I mean, God really did call to Moshe. He really called him. It was a physical thing. The Torah is speaking about this physical. This physical world is more important to God than all of the upper worlds, than heaven and the heavens of heavens. And this physical world is where God gave the Torah. He didn't give the Torah to the upper worlds. The Torah is here. And even though we have zero appreciation of what God is, all the angels are all screaming and they're all yelling to God with fear and with love, and they're exchanging notes with each other and energy to each other and things like this. And what do we explain? What are we exchanging? We're exchanging checks and money and what do we understand about God? But this is where God gave the Torah, and God wants us to, yes, appreciate him like the angels. And that's why he called to Moshe. He gave extra power to Moshe so that Moshe would be able to be the connector between God and the Jewish people. So to speak, he plugged Moshe in order that the appliances should work. Right? We Jews, we're the appliances. We're the refrigerator and the fan and the toaster and this. The plug it in. Moshe is the plug. And this God is calling to Moshe, so to speak. He's plugging him in. He's giving Moshe an extra connection. That's this little letter Aleph. What is this letter Aleph? Aleph is the letters Pele. Where is this? Oh, what happened? That's the problem with this thing, is you can't Sort of put your finger in the place. Jumps up. Here we go. Oh. Aleph, that letter Aleph, is also the same letters as Pella. Pei Lam. Read it backwards. Pella. Pella means wonder, miracle. It's what's above understanding. Also, this letter Aleph also is the language, is the word Aleph in Hebrew means to teach. Like it says, Alephecha Chachma, Alephecha Bina. It's in the beginning of what? Of Proverbs, Mishlei, I think. Proverbs. I will teach you wisdom. Milah Kalomar, in other words, Shehu Makar Umimenu Timsa Chachma. Okay, so the letter Aleph indicates the word Pella, which is very, very high. And the letter Aleph also indicates the word teaching, which is low, coming down. So in this little Aleph that God gave to Moshe, right? This is a little Aleph here, Vayikra. In the Torah, it's written a little Aleph. This includes in it teaching, but it also includes in it the word Pella, which means connecting to the highest of highest sources. Hainu kia Aleph is Beketer. This letter Aleph, which is the letter of Pella, this is in Keter, which is above wisdom. This is the source from which comes wisdom. Ayin Mashkatuv in Parshas Tzav, Asher Asayim Mochem Lahafli, Pella. Look in the Zohar, Bereshit, in the beginning. But there is also, okay, that's the letter Aleph, the little Aleph that God gave over here. But if you look in the whole Torah, we talked about this before, in the book of Chronicles, Divrei Yomim, you'll see that over there it begins with a big Aleph. Aleph Ravavan. Hainu Bechinas the Keter. That's the level of Keter. Kamoshehu b'mahuto v'atzmuto. Okay, so there's two levels of Keter. There's two levels of God's crown. There's God's, like a crown, right? A crown of a king sits on his head. But there's also the top of the crown. There is like the big diamond up there, and it's really splendid. That's what's called the top of the crown. So this letter Pele, this letter Aleph that God gave to Moses in order to, he gave it to him. By Yikra means he gave it to him. This is an inspiration and a giving of power to Moshe from the level of Pele to the letter Aleph, which means Chachma. And it's from this amazingness of God, this miraculousness of God that's above all understanding, to understanding, because it means two things, right? Pele is amazing and Aleph is teaching. This gave Moshe the ability to go into the Ohel Moed. But there's another Aleph written in the Torah. And this is the Aleph, which is the beginning of Chronicles, and that's a big Aleph. That also indicates on Pele and Keter, but the essence of Keter, not the part of Keter that's resting on the king's head, so to speak, but the top of the Keter, that's the crown. This is called the Moshe V'Nimshach Lo Ha'ara. Hainu B'Chinas Keter Kamoshehu B'Mahuto, as it is in its essence. There, this big Aleph, Moshe can't go. This is what filled up. Remember, we said it filled up. Malay. Not only it filled up, but the God's presence was full. This is the big Aleph. Aleph me'asmin zerin, the Aleph from the small Alephs. It's here. Or this is a ray of this big Keter of the top of the crown of God. Like it's drawn down below by means of all sorts of contractions and concealments of this level. Vayikra Moshe, so that he could be called to Moshe. Why did God do this? Because he wanted to give Moshe like a small taste of this godliness. Sha'al Yedei by means of this, it would be like a rope, like a ladder. He could climb up. It was a power, giving him a power that afterwards, he could come into the tent of meeting. He could come into the tabernacle. Asher shachen alav anan, because the cloud was there. So what are we saying here? What's going on here? The essence of God is the Torah. This is the essence of God is too much. It can't be revealed. Somewhat of it was revealed on Mount Sinai, but it was only temporary. It says when the Jews even got this, their souls jumped out of their bodies. It was so real and so amazing. Right? 1,000,000 times more than like if a person gets wins the lottery. They even tell a joke. Why not? I'll tell a joke. It's getting pretty serious. I'll tell a joke. Once upon a time, there was a Jew, an old Jew. He was 95 years old. Mr. Tzemach. He lived in Ramat Gan. A joke. And his next door neighbor, a young fellow like 20 years old, he worked in the lottery office. How they would work, people in Israel, they buy lottery. Like in America, they buy a lottery. I never bought one. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I just never did. You buy a lottery, and then in the nighttime, in the middle of the night, they pick the number, and then they call the person up. And they call the person up, and they tell him that he won. Right? They tell him that he won. They give him the money. So it ended up, this young fellow picked out the number, and he saw that it was Mr. Tzemach, the 95-year-old neighbor, his neighbor. So he said, "Oy boy, Mr. Tzemach is going to win this money, and he's going to win. It's like $100 million. He's going to get this news. He's going to have a heart attack. He might die. I'm going to go and tell him. I'm going to go and tell him early in the morning. Let's not call him up. Don't call him up. Don't wake him up. I'll go to his house early in the morning. I'll break the news to him little by little. I know that that's not the usual procedure, but this is, I have to go and save the man's life of it. So he goes to Mr. Early in the morning, 5 in the morning, knocks on his door. Mr. Tzemach is just coming out. He wants to go to pray. He's already, Mr. Tzemach, he said, "Oh, hi, how you doing? So I'm your next door neighbor." "Sure, of course I know you. How are you doing?" "I'm on my way to pray." I says, "Listen, have you got just a second?" He says, "Tell you, I'm a little bit in a hurry, but," he says, "Listen, I just wanted to talk to you for a second. Mr. Tzemach, there's this thing called the lottery." He says, "Yeah, sure, there's a lottery. I play the lottery also. But excuse me, I have to go pray." I said, "No, listen, there's sometimes people win the lottery." I said, "Of course, people win. If people didn't win, nobody would play." "Okay, now, excuse me, I just have to, you want to come with me? Come, let's go pray together." I said, No, I just wanted to say something. Sometimes people win like $1,000. Yeah, sure. Sometimes people win $100,000. Says, "Listen, but what are you trying to get to? I know people win to 100,000. Sometimes people win 50,000, and sometimes, in fact, I even know that the prize now is 100 million. But I have to go." He says, "Listen, Mr. Tzemach, that's what I wanted to tell you. You won." "What?" He says, "You won the 100 million. You won the 100 million. Mazal tov. I'll bring you a chair." Mr. Tzemach says, "You know what? $100 million. I'm an old man. What am I going to do with all the money? You know what? You take the money." As soon as this fellow heard, "I take the money," he had a heart attack. They had to take him to the hospital. So what does it mean? As long as it's money of somebody else, so I'm not excited. As soon as it becomes mine, then it's impossible to even so much. I took it to heart. That's called dat. But there's certain things that are so real and so good that we just can't accept them. And that's just talking about physical money. But here we're talking about the essence of all being too much. Even Moshe couldn't take it. It was even higher than the revelation of Mount Sinai. So in order that he should be able to approach and go into the Holy of Holies, or even to the tent of meeting, that therefore there had to be this little aleph. But that's what it says, Adam ba'aleph, Masfan Ravim. In Divrei HaYamim, in the book of Chronicles, it says the word Adam with a big aleph. Remember, I showed you yesterday, the first word in the book of Chronicles, it goes through the history of man. And it starts off with the first man, Adam. When it says the first man, it has a big letter aleph. This refers to Adam Arishon as he was before he sinned. But then Adam Arishon, the first man, before he sinned, it was much higher than even Moses. Kamosh Katuv, like it says in Sefer Gilgulim, like it says in the book of reincarnation, chapter Yutet. Look also Vayikra al Moshe and the Gemara and Yoma, etc., etc., etc. Other places in the Midrash Rabbah, Parsha Shmot, B'Kehelet Rabbah, and also in another place. So now we can understand why it says in the Midrash, Bram, but hacha ani hu akora, v'ani hu amadaber. With Abraham, it said there was an angel that called, but God spoke to him. But by Moses, it was God that called, and God spoke to him. We can begin what it says, Om Razal, in the Pasuk, Elam Moadei Hashem, Mikrei Kodesh. These are the holy holidays that you call them. Again, this word call, Vayikra, Tikru. V'korei Tikra'u Atem. You can also read it that you Tikra'u Otam, that you should call them, or you can say that you should call Atem, you. In other words, that you are the ones that make them holy. Asher Tikra'u Otam b'moadam, that you will call them, or you can say that you can call Tikra'u Otam, that you are the ones that make them the holidays. Shakirush Moadot, that the sanctifying of the holidays, Bekriyat Beit Din, Tikra'u Atem, that you, the Beis Din, the judicial court, they're the ones that decide when the month starts. So they're the ones that decide when the holidays are, essentially. Kamosha and like we say, Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmani, the Jewish people, they sanctify the times. Yisrael Inuhu Mekadesh Zmani, the Jewish people, they make the days holy by means of what? By calling them. So the same thing God called to Moshe means he injected in him a higher level of holiness, a higher level of godliness. If you want to say at a higher level of reality, this is Kamavur Bazor, like it says in the Zohar, Parshas Amor, Lamalka, the Zamin, Ashpizin. It's like a king that he invites guests. Talta, Inam, there are 3 Zimnin Makadesh, 3 times that make holy. Why? Because the holidays, usually they fall on the 6 weekdays, usually. But as then, Ayom Dachol, then the regular weekday, if there falls in it, if there occurs in it a holiday, like this year, Pesach falls on Sunday. Hainu Shehu, Nikra v'Nazmin, the Bechinas Kodesh, then the holiday, it calls. And it evokes this level of holiness, which is Chachmei Eloah, God's upper wisdom. Therefore, it's called Mikra Kodesh. And this is something like the king that calls guests. In other words, that king takes regular people and he calls them and makes them holy. In order that these regular weekdays, which they are what's called the externality of God's creation, Chachma Bina, God's emotions. Why are there 6 days of the week and then Shabbat? Why? Who says there's 6 days of the week? Why can't there be 10? After Napoleon, in France, they tried to make a 10-day week. 10-day week. There'll be 3 weeks in the month. They tried to do it. There's some people that even, I think, still keep that in France. Who says there has to be days of the week at all? Right? Days of the month. You can look at the moon. You can tell what day of the month it is. You can look at the sun. You can tell what season of the year it is, but you can't tell what day of the week it is. There's no such thing. Day of the week. You can't look at the moon or the sun or the wind or something to tell you which, today's Monday, today's Tuesday. There's no such thing. Why did we make up this thing about 7 days a week? As far as I know, this is pretty much universal, a 7-day week. Even any place where it was vaguely known that there's such a thing as Torah, so everybody accepts this thing. There's a 7-day week. Says why? Because God created the world in 7 days. And each day has a different aspect of godliness from which it was created. Why did God create it in 7 days? Because there's a pattern of creation. It's called God's 10 sfirot. 10 sfirot. And 7 of those sfirot of God are emotions. And God created the world from his emotions. Because God could have created the whole world in one instant. He didn't have to schlep it out for 7 days. Right? There's scientists that say couldn't be 7 days. It's too short. It has to be 7 eons, 7 billion years, 7 trillion years, 7 light years, 7 whatever it is. Right? Can't possibly be such a short amount of time. But that's exactly the opposite. God could have created the whole world in one instant. Why did he schlep it out so long for 6 days? So the answer is he did it because that's according to his emotions. So it says, but the world, that's externality of God's emotions. Chesed u'gevur, etc. Lalos lamaila lebechinat chachmei Eloah. And when there's a holiday, this elevates them to their source, which is what's called God's upper wisdom. She bechinas kodesh elyon, which is the upper holiness. But there has to be, first of all, in order to make these regular mundane days holy, there has to be, first of all, some sort of a preparation from above, from this level of chachmei Eloah into that day, and then it can elevate it up. And what does this come by? This is by the Jewish people. When the Jewish people say today is Pesach, today is this, today is that, then that makes the weekday be able to be elevated to this level. Al zen emar, like it says, Asher tikru otam. Therefore, it says, Asher tikru atem. You're the ones that make the days holy. Now, it's the same thing pretty much that happened there with Moses. Moses was at a lower level. God wanted to raise him up to a higher level. Moses was such a level that he couldn't go into the Ohel Moed. He couldn't go into the tabernacle. There was a full revelation of God there. So therefore, God called him, just like we call to the holidays, and that gives them power that we call to the weekdays, that elevates them that they can be holidays. Vatam al derech ma'am results, like what the rabbis say about the inyan of a shliach. That a shliach of a person is like the person. And therefore, ein shlichus l'choresh shatav v'katan. Therefore, a person that hasn't got any intelligence, a child, a fool, it can't be a emissary of someone else. She'en kamoto l'mashliach. Someone wants to marry a woman, so he has to give her money. He doesn't have to give her the money. He can appoint an emissary to do it. But the emissary has to be a person that's like him, that can also marry a woman. So he can't take a non-Jew and send with non-Jew with money to marry a woman, right? Because the non-Jew is not like the one who's sending it. He also can't send a child to do it. But he can send, he has someone that's similar to him. So the same thing is that we, Jewish people, we're the emissaries of God. How so? We'll see. And bar shlichos, if the person that I send, right? If the person that is sent to marry a woman for the one who's sending him, harihu kamo, then he is like this person and he can carry out area shaish makadish bo b'shlucho, like it says that a person can marry a woman by means of an emissary, but the emissary has to be a person that he himself could marry this woman himself. Al kain, therefore, al derech zeh shliach makadish ha'elyon. Therefore, the shliach mikodesh elyon, if we are emissaries of Hashem, lahazmin ayomim, therefore we have the ability to make a regular day, a regular weekday, shu mikre kodesh, that it can be a holy day, a holiday. That's impossible. We have the ability to make, for instance, this Sunday into Pesach, right? We can only have the power to do this if we are like the one who is sending us, namely, Atem b'nei Israel, ne'amar aleim kodesh Yisrael Hashem, that the Jewish people are holy to God. And that's the idea of God calling to Moshe, that he gave him new powers that was able to elevate him, something like how we give power to the weekdays, that we can elevate it to be a holiday. As we will continue tomorrow. We all need this power, we all need this energy. And the Rebbe is going to say that now that we don't have the Holy Temple, first of all, he's going to say now every Jew has this Moses inside of him. So that God called to Moses is really a message that's very vital to each and every one of us. And now we don't have the temple. We're going to see we have the Torah and we have the commandments, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.